In the next 12 weeks, you can get ahead of 99% of people this year. All you have to do is follow this incredibly simple, science-backed process, but here's a word of caution. Understanding this is easy, but executing is hard. To separate yourself from 99% of people, you will need to apply every single step. But don't worry, I'll be providing you with a worksheet that you can download from the description below, so you can carefully apply every single step. And this was inspired by the 12-week year by Moran and Michael Lennington, a book that has been vetted by thousands of clients and hundreds of companies. And hi, I'm Liz. This channel is all about the awesome books I read and experiment with, and I want to give you the best possible summary and application of the 12-week year out there. And with that, let's get straight into the core message that's incredibly easy to understand, but most people don't know how to use it. Let me know if this sounds familiar. You begin the year with big goals. By the end of January, you find yourself behind where you need to be. But you're not too worried because you think to yourself, I've got plenty of time. There's still 11 months left to catch up. By the end of March, you're still behind. But again, you're not too worried because there's still a whole 9 months left to make progress. By the time November rolls around, you're still behind. Now, your thinking changes. Sigh. The next year is only 3 months away. I'll just wait until January to get a fresh start on my goals. Here, we lack a sense of urgency because of our human nature to procrastinate. Then we feel defeated and want to wait for a fresh start. This is where the 12-week year becomes incredibly useful. This is why annual planning, more often than not, leads to less than optimal performance. To increase performance, we need to focus on shorter timeframes. In essence, a 12-week year. This is long enough to get things done, but short enough for a sense of urgency. Not only that, it's created not just once a year, but 4 times a year. Applied correctly, this radical way of thinking should be able to 4x your output over the year. But first, you need an incredibly strong reason to push yourself all the way, and that brings us to principle number 2, the emotional connection. To create this connection, you will need a very compelling vision of your life, something that is bigger than your present life. But wait, before you think this is like woo-woo vision nonsense, read this part of the book. There's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is that a portion of our brains, the amygdala, reacts negatively when we are facing uncertainty. So when we imagine the future as being vastly different from today, we experience uncertainty and the amygdala kicks in and shuts down the process. That's the bad news. The good news is that there's another portion of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that acts as a counterbalance to the amygdala. It lights up when you imagine greatness for yourself in the future, and scientists have actually tracked increased electrical impulses in the PFC when their subjects imagine the future. On top of that, there's also this effect called neuroplasticity, where your brain has the ability to change and develop physiologically. If you don't engage your PFC, you are strengthening the part of your brain that resists change. But you can strengthen and develop your brain simply by regularly and repeatedly thinking about an inspiring vision where you emotionally connect with the life you desire. This is a research-based reason as to why visions actually do work. Now, Brian and Mike say there are 3 time horizons to focus on. First, long-term aspirations. These should be big enough that they make you feel at least a little bit uncomfortable. Think about all of the things that you want to have, do, and be in your life. Physically, spiritually, mentally, relationally, financially, professionally, and personally. Write everything you can think of. To keep this video simple, I'm just going to focus on the financial aspect. So our example aspirational vision here will be to become a millionaire in the next 20 years. Thus, this seems scary and impossible. For many of us, it definitely does. That's good. That's the way it should be. Now, Brian and Mike tell us to ask ourselves this question. What if? What if it's possible? Then the next question to ask ourselves is this. How might I do this? Possible then becomes probable. Essentially, if you save $25,000 a year for the next 20 years, assuming a 7% return on investment, you will hit $1 million in 20 years. Then you factor this into your 12-week year. As you're executing your 12-week year, you will see that probable then becomes a given. Now, from this aspirational vision, what is a 3-year vision? So for us here, that's to have $75,000 in investments at the end of 3 years. That's $25,000 per year. And after that, what is our goal for our first 12-week year? That takes us to the most important part of this video that you absolutely can't miss, the execution system. Now, there are 5 distinct steps under the execution system, and let's start with first, developing your 12-week plan. Here is exactly how to plan your 12-week year. Your overall 12-week goal should go right at the top here. Now, since there are 4 12-week years in a traditional year, we need to squirrel away about $6,000 per 12-week year. That's our goal. Now, what are the specific tactics that we can use to get there? 1, if my biggest expense is eating out at restaurants every day, I want to cut that down to at most once a week. 2, if my next biggest expense is shopping, I want to cut that out completely by implementing a shopping ban over the next 12 weeks. And 3, to increase my income, I will look for twice weekly math tutoring gigs paying at least $50 an hour. The key here is to identify the 2 to 3 vital tactics that will drive the majority of your results. These are to be done either daily or weekly, or it could even be a one-time thing. Everything here is weekly, as you can see from the column titled due date. Take note that the first word of each sentence should be a verb. This is important for later on in this video. Also, these individual tactics should be incredibly specific and entirely measurable. Here's another example directly from the book for a completely different 12-week goal of weight loss. Feel free to pause the video here to check out how it's structured and to take inspiration from it. And that is exactly how you develop your 12-week plan. But without the proper schedule, it's almost impossible to achieve your 12-week goals. So, how do you plan your schedule? By using strategic, buffer, and breakout blocks. A strategic block is where you work on your tactics for extended periods of time, like between 2 to 4 hours. Since one of our tactics is tutoring students twice weekly, this will form our strategic blocks. Also, these strategic blocks should be scheduled early in the week so that if one gets interrupted or cancelled, you have time to reschedule it. Next, we have buffer blocks. For dealing with lower level busy work and admin stuff, these are usually between 30 minutes to 1 hour in length. For our goal of saving money, this could be used to review your credit card statements, looking for more side hustles, or calculating your monthly expenditure and savings. And then we have breakout blocks, which are designed to prevent burnout. Of course, all of these are just guidelines ultimately, so feel free to do what's best for your goals. Brian and Mike also provide a sample weekly time block in their 12-week year field guide. Feel free to, again, pause the video if you need to take inspiration from it. And that's how you structure your time for maximum efficiency. Now, how exactly do we measure our results after we execute on our tactics? By measuring lead and lag indicators. In the 1960s, Frederick Hertzberg, an industrial psychologist, set out to determine what motivates people in the workplace. His extensive research identified the top 2 motivators as achievement and recognition. Now, the only way to know if you are achieving is through measuring our results. So, what are lead and lag indicators? Here's our 12-week plan again. Lag indicators are the end results that you are striving to achieve. In our case, that's the extra savings of $6,000. It's called a lag indicator because it happens only at the end of the 12 weeks. On the other hand, lead indicators are the activities that produce the end result. In our case, these are our tactic. For example, did we have a twice weekly math tutoring session this week, 2 hours each, resulting in $200 of extra income this week? Remember how I mentioned each first word should be a verb? This becomes an action that you can do, and it's something you can execute, and it becomes a lead indicator. That's why it's important, because ultimately we have greater control over our actions than our results. Now, here's how to keep score each week. This is the formula. The number of tactics we complete each week divided by the total number of tactics multiplied by 100 is our percentage completion, our score. Let's say we slipped up on our shopping ban and bought a new pair of shoes this week. But at least we completed the other 2 tactics. That's 2 out of 3 tactics, so our score is 67%. Not half bad, but Brian and Mike advise aiming for an average of at least 85% completion over the 12 weeks. That gives you a little bit of a breathing room to slip up sometimes, but not all the time. As long as you have a decently high execution on your lead indicators, the results or the lag indicator will eventually come. The 4th step is to have a wham. Without this, the majority of participants are shown to have failed. Let me explain what this means. If we go back to the tactics that we've established, chances are most of these are something that we've never done before. These new tactics are easy to brainstorm, but very difficult to consistently execute. But as many studies have shown, willpower has a fatigue factor, so we need an accountability system or a buddy system. Ideally, you should have a group of 2 to 4 committed individuals to meet up for a weekly accountability meeting, or WHAM in short. Ideally, each WHAM should be held on Monday morning and should last about 15 to 30 minutes. Of course, feel free to change this to suit your schedule. This is just a guideline. During the WHAM, there's a simple agenda to follow, but feel free to change it according to your needs. First, each person is to share their results for the entire 12-week year to date. Then each person is to share their scores from last week. After, share the intentions for the upcoming week. And of course, receive constructive feedback and suggestions for each individual's plan. You can also fit in other things like sharing what has been successful or just share positive encouragement in general. This is what it means to hold a WHAM or weekly accountable meetings. The 5th step is the 13th week. There are 52 weeks in a year. So we're able to have 4 12-week years in each annual year. But you may have been wondering, what about the missing 4 weeks? What about the 13th week at the end of each 12-week year? That's for you to decide. It could be a chance to have an extra week of effort if you need it to hit your goals. Otherwise, just take it as a huge breakout block with time to rest up and reflect before launching yourself into your next 12-week year with fresh goals. That's the final step of the 12-week year. I personally did a 12-week experiment on this book. I'll put the video up on the screen when it's done being edited, and I'll see you in that one.